One of the problems with climate change is that it stretches our imagination to breaking point. First, we have to accept that through our infinitesimal, minuscule actions, we are doing what all prior generations have dreamt of doing. In the past, people have danced for rain or prayed for the winter to end, but without much hope of success. And now we do it without even trying. And the idea that us, these tiny little specks on the skulls on top of the planet, are able to exert an effect which sweeps across the entire atmosphere is almost incomprehensible. Then we have to accept that the actions which are causing this problem are actions which hitherto have been considered either entirely innocent or positively beneficial. Making a cup of tea for the next door neighbours, picking up your kids from school, flying to New York for your brother's wedding. Under the old pre-climate change moral code, all those were good things, morally good things. Under the new moral code demanded by climate change, they're also bad ones. And we find that what climate change does is to present us with the spectacle of two valid moral codes in irreconcilable antagonism. When you look at that last example of flying over to your brother's wedding in New York, you see an instance of what could be the most intractable of all causes of climate change, the phenomenon I call love miles. Love miles are the distance between yourself and the people you love. To redeem those love miles, you must travel. And that travelling is the fastest growing cause of environmental destruction. We see in this phenomenon that the planet could be destroyed by love, not something we were forced to contemplate before. But perhaps most mind-blowing of all, hardest of all to grasp, the thing which challenges our imagination more than anything else, is the idea that we, these minuscule, puny, ridiculous bipeds, can actually turn this thing around and could start to change our behavior in such a way that we influence the pattern of the entire global atmosphere for the good rather than the ill. And this is such a hard thing to grasp that it strikes me that even within the environmental movement, few dare to believe it. What I've seen over the past year has been an extraordinary and rather frightening phenomenon that the great majority of people whom I've met and talked to about climate change about a year ago would say, well, yes, that does sound fairly serious, but is it really such a big deal? Do we really have to do anything about it? I mean, it's one of these environmental problems which come up every so often, and surely it's not nearly as bad as people say it is. And that is switched, almost imperceptibly, and without any transitional phase at all, to a position of equal moral abnegation, which is to say, it's too late, we can't do anything about it. Nowhere in between has anyone said, hey, this is a huge problem, it has to be stopped and we're going to act to stop it. Well, very few people have, but the majority of people who have taken an interest in it have gone from the sort of hopelessness of not acknowledging the seriousness of the situation to the hopelessness of acknowledging it to such an extent they believe they can't do anything about it. And what I set out to demonstrate in Heat and in this talk is that it is not too late, not yet, not quite, that there is still a chance of turning this around, that even with our puny human bipedal resources, we can change the climate for the better, and we can avert what could otherwise become the greatest catastrophe that humanity has ever seen. Now that sounds like a wild statement, the greatest catastrophe that humanity has ever seen, and it's a sort of statement which the right-wing newspapers love to jump up and down all over. But the right-wing newspapers are run by people, well, in fact all the newspapers are run by people who have no understanding of science whatsoever. I went to a meeting of some very senior journalists, 150 of them, some of the top journalists from all over Europe. And the guy who was running it, chairing it, John Snow, asked us to put up our hands if we had a science degree. And out of 150, 3 of us put our hands up. And that, to me, explained a great deal of what I've been reading recently and hearing recently and watching recently. That a lot of the people in the key decision-making positions simply don't understand what they're looking at. They do not understand the difference between peer-reviewed research, published in a proper peer-reviewed academic journal, and figures made up on the back of an envelope by some bloke sponsored by Exxon. They do not understand the difference between a systematic review of the literature and cherry-picking, where you just go through finding the data which suits your case and ignore all the rest of it. And as a result, we see unconscionable volumes of nonsense published on an almost daily basis throughout the media. But what the science says is that climate change has the capacity, the potential, to make all previous crises look like sideshows at the circus of human suffering. Wars, acts of genocide, famines, plagues. We haven't seen anything yet by comparison to some of the possible predictions which have been made. In last month's edition of the Journal of Hydrometeorology, I'm sure you've already read it, there's a paper which shows that, well, for the first time, it manages to strike what seems to be a clear prediction of the level of wetting and drying across the global atmosphere over the next 100 years. It's been a controversial matter for some time because as the atmosphere heats, there's an increased rate of evaporation from the ground, which would be expected to dry the ground, but that increased rate of evaporation also means there's an increased rate of rainfall. And there's been a lot of dispute about what the balance is. Well, scientists at the Met Office, for the first time, have published a comprehensive model incorporating all the latest data, which suggests there's going to be a severe global drying by 2100. And what this suggests, in particular, is a drying of continental interiors, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and many parts of Asia. Although that bit is not yet quite certain. If that is the case, combined with some of the other effects that we already know about, for instance, the inundation of coastal arable land by the sea, the salination of coastal aquifers, in other words, salt water as the sea level rises, creeping into your freshwater underground water supplies and contaminating them and making them useless for growing plants or indeed for drinking water. When we see those in combination with several other effects, plus rising human population levels, we have a formula for a net food deficit at the global level. In other words, even when you have a harvest which is in line with expectations under that model, there will not be enough food to go round. It's beyond my powers of description to try to explain what a world of 9 billion people in net food deficit would look like. But I'll leave it to your imagination.